Thank you, John.
Let's bring in Brett Baer, the anchor of Special Report. This was a sort of a slow motion dismissal or resignation. I'm not sure we've ironed out exactly. I guess he did, Steve Bannon did tender his resignation some time ago, and it was finally accepted today, Brett.
Yeah, John, I think this was in the works for some time. Obviously, the president was asked about it on Tuesday, and his words about Steve Bannon were tepid at best. Basically, we'll see. Remember that as chief strategist, Steve Bannon has been the guy that has been trying to keep the president on track when it comes to his campaign pledges, what he promised to do. Steve Bannon had a big whiteboard in his office that had all of the campaign promises and pledges that candidate Donald Trump made, and that is one of the things that he was designed to do and wanted to do, was keep those promises front and center. It became too much in the dynamics of the White House now, but just to set the table here, now the chief strategist is gone. We have seen the chief of staff leave, the press secretary, the deputy chief of staff, the FBI director, the national security advisor, and the communications director. 6 months in to President Trump's time in office. That is a lot of change inside an administration for that short a time. This was something that had been brewing for some time, we're told. But you're right, it facilitated itself this week.
Dana Perino was on with us a moment ago and said that she thought, in her view, Steve Bannon brought distraction, distrust, and destruction to the White House. Clearly, the president wouldn't have kept him around this long if he didn't like some of what Mr. Bannon had to say, but especially since that interview with American Prospect, he seemed to get in over his head, I guess.
Well, there was that interview. He also talked to the New York Times and the Washington Post. And clearly he was being put out there, or put himself out there, either to draw some of the fire away from President Trump, or to make his final swan song, if you will, before he was leaving the White House. That interview with American Prospect raised a lot of eyebrows here in Washington on a number of fronts. Namely China, and the fact that China should be our #1 adversary, and that everything we do should be pointing to it's either us or them. And that philosophy, he was feeling that he was taking that to the president and trying to outdo his counterparts at state and defense. And also his comments about, these Confederate statues and the policy at which politically he believed that Democrats continuing to talk about race only helped the Trump administration in the long run politically. And I think there were a lot of people inside the administration who believe that is not the policy that this president should be following.
This departure of Steve Bannon would seem to mark the chief of staff, the new chief of staff, General John Kelly, putting his stamp and asserting his muscle in the Oval Office.
I think you can say that, but I do think that this decision was coming from President Trump, who had been hearing from a number of different places that Steve Bannon may be a problem for him going forward, inside and outside his administration. So General Kelly clearly is trying to clean up house and trying to make it orderly. But I don't know if you put this decision on General Kelly as far as this final ouster.
Brett, this is Heather Childers. How do you think this will impact the agenda moving forward? I mean, there's some big things coming up, tax reform, the budget. How do you think this will impact those?
Well, listen, I think there are lawmakers who were pushing to have this happen up on Capitol Hill. If that is somehow an olive branch to them, then perhaps they can work a little bit better. This is a tough environment, Heather, after this week. Clearly the worst week of the president's time in office, just by the series of events that happened. And if he can somehow get back to a place where he can work with lawmakers just in the Republican Party, not even talking about Democrats, but you have some big things that are going to happen in the next few weeks. The raising of the debt ceiling, the budget. These things deal with the shutting down of government potentially, and he'll need Capitol Hill to get on its horse.
Yeah, the deadline quickly approaching.
Yeah, mid-September.
Yeah.
So, Brett, there is apparently no with the departure of Steve Bannon, there is no chief strategist at the White House. Is that a job that then falls on Kellyanne Conway, or what are you hearing?
Well, I think he's got a lot of cooks in the kitchen now, and a lot of people who feel emboldened perhaps in this environment. Who does this politically benefit? It benefits Jared Kushner, his position. He obviously had a rivalry with Steve Bannon at one time. You have General Kelly, who's in a position of authority now, and has been, and given that by President Trump. And I think there are others who will maneuver themselves into chief strategist, Kellyanne Conway among them.
Bret Baier, we'll see you tonight on Special Report. No, it is going to be an interesting Friday night program. Thank you.
Special Report tonight at 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
All right. So that's a special report. 2 hours
there
worth.
You go.
Thank you.